This episode is brought to you by Curriculum Rehab by us, the team here at Brave New Teaching. It is the first and only teacher PD of its kind, a course to help teachers like you by guiding you through creating your own personal framework for curriculum. You make it work for you, your students, and your unique situation because nobody else knows what the kiddos in your classroom need the way that you do. Curriculum Rehab takes all of the resources available to you, all of the lessons, the assessments, the activities, all of the texts, everything that could possibly be there for you, and it helps you organize what you actually need in order to attain your teaching objectives. These are the strategies that Amanda and myself have used in our own classrooms, have developed over very long years of teaching and figuring things out, combined together to create this framework and these strategies that we can guide you through. This course will give you the tools you need for a complete curriculum overhaul or to start from scratch. Wherever you are on that continuum, it does it all for you and with you on your timeline. So start today, do a little bit more in a couple of months, and then pick it up next summer. It's Teacher PD the way it should be on your own time. Head to curriculumrehab.com/course for more information, or just head to the show notes for this episode. We cannot wait to see you there. It's finally time to take control of what goes on in your own classroom and create the curriculum of your dreams. All right, let's get back into the show. Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching. Hello, Amanda.
Oh, hey, Marie. How's it going?
Very well. Thank you so much. And I am very excited. We just finished right before recording this bit talking to our friend, Christina Schnider. The daring English teacher is how you very well might know her on Instagram and on her blog, thedaringenglishteacher.com. And Christina has just released her first book.
I know. It's so awesome.
Yes, we got to chat with her today. We talked about a whole bunch of different things, but we really got into her book specifically, but who and where and how this book can be helpful. It's called Building Strong Writers, and it is available just about everywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And Christina came on today to talk to us just about where the ideas and the need for this book came from. Not the need, but where she was started the process of writing this book, what it is like to be a full-time English teacher and a mom of 2 kids and a business owner and write and release a book. That's not every single one of those is a lot. And then you put them all together. Yeah.
Yes. And then you have Christina.
And then you have Christina. Yes.
I can remember first falling in love with her work and following her, almost 10 years ago.
Isn't that
she's
crazy?
Been doing this for a long time. And I think my favorite part of our conversation was where Christina lays out this really cool strategy called the 3-sentence strategy.
Yep.
And so if you're is this really for me? I don't know. I think give this interview a listen. You're going to walk away with strategies just from the episode. And then if that feels like it's in line with what you need, I think her book is absolutely a great next step. So this episode's really going to give you a taste for, not only Christina's, her personality and her passion behind writing, but it'll give you a feel for the kinds of strategies and tools that her book is going to offer you.
Yeah, she shares so many ideas on her blog and on social media.
Always.
All the time. And in this podcast episode that you're about to hear, but her book condenses them in a way that only a book can, right? It brings it all together. It shows the through story. It tells the context and her background behind her own little personal stories. And she shares quite a few of those also in this episode. And you just get more of it as you get into the book. We were really excited to chat with her. The 3 of us actually got to hang out this past summer when we were all at the Teachers Pay Teachers conference, which was just nice and fun to sit down as a few teachers and chit chat. And then all of a sudden we're like, hey, wait a minute, your book, you should come on the podcast. That's where we were just hanging out. And what, actually, this would help even more than just the 3 of us. It would help way more people in their classrooms. So it was really nice. And we are very thankful to Christina for hanging out with us today. And we can't wait for you to listen. We think you're going to enjoy.
Well, and thank you for coming along. If you got here from one of Christina's recommendations, maybe this is your first time at the podcast. Marie and I have been doing this for a long time. And I have to just say that we really take our time considering who we're going to have on the show. And talking to Christina this summer and spending time with her as a person, not just as an English teacher, not just as someone who shares her work on social media. Christina is an incredible human. We really, really had some wonderful conversations that just, I don't know, at a very human level, I adore her. And I'm so grateful to have had that time to spend. And just, I think the podcast isn't having someone with you in person, but it's the closest that we can provide to this teacher community. And we just take that job really seriously. And we want to bring you the kind of people that you would want to hang out with in real life and learn from in real life. And she is both of those things.
Absolutely. And like Amanda just said, we adore her, and we had a really nice time chatting today, and we cannot wait for you to hear it. And we were excited to be able to call one of our friends part of our author series this fall, right?
Yes.
She's right in there as part of our series with authors. And she, talked about her hopes and dreams of one day winning a Pulitzer, and that changed into becoming an author, and she's going to tell it much better in her own words. So without any further ado, here is our interview with the daring English teacher herself, Christina Schnider. Cue the music.
You're listening to Brave New Teaching, and we are so much more than a podcast.
We give teachers the inspiration, support, and tools to challenge the status quo.
I'm Amanda, and I'm a former English teacher from Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm a teacher from Southern California.
Join us at bravenewteaching.com to find out more about our courses, festivals, and get every episode's show notes.
We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show. All right, friends, we are very excited to welcome to the podcast a friend of ours and a very likely somebody that you have met online before. And now you get to actually hear from her right here in real time. Christina Schnider, the daring English teacher. Welcome to the Brave New Teaching podcast. Hi, friend.
Yay!
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you here.
We really are. I do want to give you the chance to introduce yourself, because I think people have, right, as with so much of our social media, right, you have an idea of who someone is from what they share on social media, but do you want to give our listeners a little bit more of your background in ELA and why you're here today?
Yeah, definitely. So I like to start off before my teaching career because I feel that really helps paint a picture. I went to college, education was not under my radar. I didn't think I was going to be a teacher. It didn't even cross my mind. I was going to be a broadcast journalist, and that was my jam. I made it all the way through my senior year of college, and I realized, oh no, I don't want to do this. But I mean, you're like a semester away from graduation. And so you go through and you get your degree. And I switched to public relations, which I really, really loved. And I worked in public relations for a while. But then the economy came crashing down and all the public relation agencies kind of died. And so I didn't have a job. And I was living in Southern California with my then fiance and his family at the time. And they were both educators. And they were like, well, Christina, why don't you be a teacher? And I'm like, what? No, no. And it took a moment to marinate with me. And then they're like, well, you love reading and you love writing and you like kids. Might as well be a teacher. It sounds like it's a good fit. And so I went back to school. I got my teaching credential and my master's degree. And now with the hindsight that I have, it's so difficult for me to think that I didn't have this as my top career choice because I truly feel it's where I'm meant to be. And so when I was looking through what kind of grade levels I wanted to teach and what subject, there was no question in my mind. It was high school English all the way. And now I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do, which is high school English, but I'm also the journalism advisor and I oversee the newspaper, which there's my journalism background.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So when we all met up this summer, Christina, I was at least fangirling big time over just the fact that you were able to do what I'm doing, which is teach full time. You also have your business. You also wrote a book. And that is what we're here to talk about today, because it is a gem. And I'm excited to talk together about how we can help get this book into the hands of teachers who need it. So let's talk about who needs it. Let's talk about how to get it to them. But first, will you tell us a little bit about your process behind writing the book? I guess what I'm really interested in is, how did you know that this needed to become a book? And then how did it become a book?
All right. So I didn't know that it needed to become a book until I started blogging more. Most of my blog posts were about teaching writing and effective strategies. And people were really reaching out on Instagram talking about how helpful these strategies are. But what really struck me the most is living in Southern California, I've only taught at big high schools. Right now, the high school I'm at, we have 20 plus teachers in our English department. So whenever we have a new teacher, they're never left alone. They never have to figure things out on their own because they always have a mentor who's literally right next door. And so when people started reaching out saying oh, I'm the only English teacher at my middle school, high school combo. I teach all the grades and I don't know what I'm doing. You are helping me so much. And I kept getting more of those. And so I was able to kind of get outside of my normal of these big, large high schools where there's tons of teachers in each department. And thinking, wow, this online community is really helping teachers who are brand new, who need this. And so I've always wanted to write a book, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit. In high school, I had 3 big life goals. And I said, if I can accomplish these life goals, with my little high school mind, I'll be good. I wanted to donate a pint of blood because I always passed out before when the Red Cross truck would come to school. So that was my life goal number 1 was donate.
Such a niche goal. I love it. Yes.
No, I remember it though. Donate a pint of blood. I wanted to run a marathon because I was in cross country and track. And so that was the ultimate running endeavor. And I wanted to, again, going back to my journalism background, I did journalism all 4 years of high school. I wanted to win the Pulitzer Prize.
Well, of course you did.
Yeah. So I'm if I can achieve those 3 goals, my life is set. So I was able to donate a pint of blood. I've ran 3 marathons. I've since stopped because I've got bad knees, not related to running. And then, okay, well, I'm not in journalism anymore. I guess there goes my Pulitzer.
Womp womp.
So I just replaced it with writing a book. And so
there you go.
And so I started during COVID, just kind of outlining the basic structure of how I kind of teach writing in my own classroom and where I start with my students. And I start really, really basic, way below their level, just because I want everyone on the same page. And I started outlining it. And then, I'm, like you said, full-time teacher. I've got 2 kids and my life is busy. So I'm just adding more things to my plate. I'm really good at that. But
you're good company. Yeah.
I reached out to Dave Burgess. I was like, hey, I think I've got a really good idea. And he was like, we like this. Let's go. And he's the publisher of the book. And so once I got the go ahead, hey, this will be published, I set out and I started writing. And luckily, it all kind of worked out really well during breaks. So I wrote the bulk of it last summer. And my kids were at tennis camp and the fitness gym has tennis and swimming and a little cafe. So while they're at tennis camp, Monday through Friday, I was in the corner on a computer, just plugging away, typing and writing. And I finished it right before school started, or maybe I finished it a month into school starting last year. I don't remember. But then it worked out really well with the school breaks again with the multiple editing processes. So with developmental editing, that came either Thanksgiving break or winter break. So I had time. And then the full-on copy editing was my spring break job, and it came right before spring break. So that was a really big blessing.
Yeah.
It would have been a lot.
Yeah.
But when I wrote it, I kind of just sat down and was like, what do I want to talk about today? What am I inspired? What part of writing do I feel like I'm ready to discuss and I'm energized about? And so I piecemealed it all together with my outline. And then it eventually, the pages kept going. And as I was writing, I kept a word count, tracker for each day, how many words. And I'd set a week for how many words I needed to write a week. I think I said I needed to write like 5 to 8,000 words a week over summer to meet my deadline. And like it just all came together. And then in the process, because I'm talking about bits and pieces of my childhood and where I came to be a teacher, I'm remembering all these things that I hadn't really thought of or didn't remember until I started writing the book, which was really fun. It was a good process.
Well, because when you're so in it, right? Like as a teacher, yeah, we've got those breaks, but like you're not, as you're reflecting on, for my experience, when I'm reflecting on my teaching, it's pretty immediate. I'm reflecting on what I just taught this past year. So even this past summer, right? Like I'm reflecting on how American Lit went last year, because that's what I'm teaching again this year. What do I need to fine tune? What do I need to adjust? And when it comes to writing, which is so huge and so particular and like subjective per person and on like any given day, right? Teaching writing, it was also kind of in the mechanics. And so I totally understand what you're saying about going through the process of writing your book made you look back and say, oh, I like, did it, have you kind of redefined things, even though you've been blogging along the way? When you string it all together, did it have you go, oh, I look at that process? Like, were you able to see it unfold in front of you almost?
No, not really.
Yeah, because that's how it reads. No, it reads like it fully developed. Not that it's not fully developed, but it reads like something that is a step by step, as if you put it together that way. But I know for a fact there's no human way that you did that, because you've been a full-time teacher. Like, it's just things you did intrinsically and then figured out and fine-tuned along the way, and they happen to all work because you're really good at what you do.
And that all comes down to, and it's a skill we teach with our own students, that comes down to having a strong outline and not just sitting down and writing, having that strong outline ready. So even though I did kind of like jump around in the writing process, I had that outline. And so it was all put together in a specific order, so that like you start at the beginning of the book, at the beginning of the school year, or just whenever you grab the book, and you work your way through and you eventually progress into more complex writing skills. But at the very beginning, it's very, very basic. And here's some very simple things to do with your students that will be effective. But the overall process, I must say, once it's done, I really had an appreciation for the editing process. I really think if I want to apply my experience in writing the book to my classroom, it would be focusing more on the editing and revising process, because that I think was the most tedious and the most time consuming, but also it took the most brain power to really go through and redefine what I was saying and making sure that all of the words were clear and specific. And then looking at all the suggestions from the editors and thinking, okay, do I want to go with this suggestion? Do I want to not go with it? Do I want to take it but slightly change it? And so kind of using that process for the classroom, I might focus more on editing in the classroom now.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the conversations I've had a lot with teachers in PD has been really trying to help move them away from writing as only a product, right? Like, I feel like there's so still, I mean, I remember that's how it was like for me when I was in high school and for, years and years before that. But I think when we only look at writing as a product of a unit where we read, of course, there's not enough time to teach editing or revision, because to teach editing and revision means that there must be a completed piece to edit and to revise. And to get a completed piece, we need to convince kids that they have a voice, show them what they can do, get them to write the piece. And then by the time we've gotten there, after 6 weeks of reading, the kids are like, no.
Cool.
I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I did something new with my honor sophomore students this year, and I loved it. It was so great. And Amanda, as a AP teacher, you would really appreciate this. So sophomore honors at my school is like a crash course for AP Lit and AP Lang. We use the rubrics and we really get them ready. And so part of it was like, I need to get a hold of AI and see what my kids can really do. So I gave them the story of an hour and a writing prompt. And like, read the story, write a paragraph.
Love it.
And I didn't give them any guidance on the story. It was all them on their own. And then so after like 2 or 3 weeks of school already this school year, where we've had focused writing lessons where we're going over like what's analysis versus summary. I had them go back. We read the story again and I had them go back. I'm like, let's go into that managed Google form. I want you to read your writing. And they're all like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I'm like, that's good. That is so good. I'm so glad that you are cringing right now because in just 2 weeks, like, look at how much you've grown. And so
that's amazing.
I'm going to definitely continue doing things like that where I kind of throw something at them, see what they can do, and then teach the skill and have them go back because I feel that there's a lot of power in them realizing their own faults in writing and their own weaknesses. And they did not want to read their paragraphs anymore.
Oh, no.
And their coach that.
Yeah, that's like kids having to hear their own voice recorded. They're like, that's a hard pass, right? Like, absolutely not. No, thank you. But also,
it always sounds different.
It does. It sounds completely different than it does inside your head, right? It's like seeing, the filter that will like invert your image. So it shows what other people see versus what you see in the mirror. Yes, that's also quite terrifying. Like,
very upsetting.
Very upsetting. Highly terrifying and upsetting. And I feel like I love that strategy that you're talking about of like just a small little something, let it lie, let it be the baseline, and then come back and even have them identify what they need to do. And then any teacher can do this. They could then find that strategy that's needed or like whatever they need within your book and apply it. Like, there you go. Let's now, if we've all defined together as a class that we need work on, like you said, summarizing versus analysis. Now let's do a couple exercises as you've got them, and then we can keep going and let's see what that does for our writing the next time we look backwards and see how far we've come.
Christina, I'm really curious what your favorite part of the book is. I think everyone who's read it so far has their own, but as the author, which section or which piece is like, you look back and you're like, that's my signature moment, or like, that's my favorite moment of what this book is all about. Yes.
So on like a English teaching technicality part, my favorite part of the book is the 3-sentence strategy. And with the 3-sentence strategy, you only have your students write 3 sentences. That's their entire prompt. And you tell them, hey, I'm going to have you write 3 sentences. And they're thinking, oh, hey, cool. This is great. Class is going. And then it's kind of torture for them. And I feel really bad because their effective filters are raised a little bit because during that writing process, I'm getting my steps in. My steps are so high on those days. I'm walking around and I'm reading each sentence. And like, I'll check off if their sentence 1 is good. And if their sentence 1 isn't where I want it to be, I let them know and they have to revise. And so it's kind of like this moment of dread when I come over to them and I'm reading their responses in real time with them there, which already makes them uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
In the best way.
But they're getting the thing that's so great about the 3-sentence strategy, though, is that it allows you to provide that immediate feedback, which is so crucial. Students aren't leaving for the day, coming back, forgetting what they're writing. They're doing it right there in real time. And they're getting immediate feedback about, yes, that was good. I liked how you included this part and you answered the prompt in sentence number 1. Sentence number 2 needs a little bit of work because you didn't blend the quote with your own writing seamlessly. Read that out loud and let's try to write it again. And so that immediate feedback is so helpful. And in California, we've got large class sizes. And I do this with classrooms of 36 students. And during those class periods where we give a 3-sentence writing response, I get to every single student and I provide feedback for at least 1 or 2 sentences for every single student.
And get your steps in.
And you get your steps in. Right. Well, and the benefit of doing that in real time in front of everybody is they're not just benefiting from your feedback on their writing. They're benefiting from your feedback on everybody within earshot. Right. So like,
yes.
It's so good because it's the real-time equivalent of workshopping somebody's writing up on the board, but it's right there and at the table. So they're actively working on their own while you're working on everybody's all at the same time. It's a true like workshop collaborative learning experience that then they're just going to get better and better the more that they hear from it. I love that strategy too. That's a really Yeah.
I was going to say that this feels like the equivalent of like when you talk about creating a room full of readers, this is creating a room full of writers. And like there is so much, and maybe this is another question for later, but like there's so much love and attention that we spend on reading, right? And like creating a culture of reading and like, right, having that as such a vital part of our classroom that I know that writing doesn't get the same amount of love, but this is like the perfect thing. What a beautiful bridge strategy to like it. I hear you doing feedback, but I also hear classroom community and like working through that vulnerability of the editing process too. That's like, I think that's one of the hardest parts for kids, right? Is like being able to be vulnerable to criticism and be within earshot of other people. You must have, right, the kind of community that you need in order for that to happen effectively.
Yeah. And a really good way to introduce this strategy, especially if your students this year are lower, or if you just want to get everyone on board, is read a picture book. Read a picture book. Do 1 3-sentence response, like together out loud, where you're modeling your thinking process and you're taking suggestions from students from the entire classroom. And then you spend a day doing that with a picture book. And then now, okay, we're going to do this on your own with our core text, with our short stories, or with a speech or any kind of text that you're choosing for your classroom. But it's a really great strategy to implement with picture books because you can handle that lesson in 1 class period.
It's so accessible too for like any kids that have specific learning needs, that are English language learners. Like you can, for the most part, you can all come in on a foundational level and then level up from there with, like you say, the core text and other sorts of things. Okay. Before we get into who needs this book, how we're going to get them this book, because we've got some newer teachers on my campus who I think, and I just want to help, right? But we have one more question for you. If teachers could implement like one practice into their daily routine, what would you suggest when it comes to writing, obviously, would make the most impact? Maybe not daily, weekly, every other day, but a regular practice that they could implement. What do you think they should focus on?
I'm going to say for maybe like each writing assignment or each writing unit, sentence frames and sentence starters. I can't give enough love to sentence frames and sentence starters. And I feel like slowly the culture of teaching is changing. And it used to be, oh, you're doing the work for them. You're making it too easy. You're babying them. But it's not that. Even when I taught seniors, like I gave them sentence frames and sentence starters, because one of the biggest obstacles that students have when it comes to writing is they have ideas. They are brilliant. They are filled with ideas. And they are just stuck on how to get it down on paper. And so if you just start the sentence for them, you're not even giving them like the important piece of the sentence. You're just starting it or giving them a little template. It's so much easier for the students to realize that they can take those ideas that they have and materialize them on paper. And it starts them writing. And it prevents the biggest thing that happens, which is, I don't know what to write. And they just sit there for the entire class period. It's like the freaking hook. I don't know what I should do. I don't know how to captivate my audience. I don't know what to write for a hook. Okay, well, skip it. Start with the background information. Here's a sentence starter for background information. Go fill in your hook later if you feel like it.
Yeah, it's fine.
So I think just using sentence frames and sentence starters, I used them when I was in collaborative classes with my EL students and even with my honors students all across the board, different levels. They benefit students. And what I found is if you use sentence frames and sentence starters enough, the students gain confidence in their own writing and they want to modify that sentence frame a little bit. They want to tweak it a little bit, but they want a little bit of reassurance. So like, hey, Ms. Schnider, is it good if I take it, but I say this instead? And that's that aha moment for the kids. Like they have it. Now it's their own writing truly. So use those sentence frames and sentence starters. And there's sentence frames and sentence starters in the book.
Yeah.
Already.
Well, and it's exactly what you're saying. It's a confidence builder because oftentimes they don't know where to start because they've got so many ideas that they don't know how to sift through. And they just need you to help push it through a funnel and then they can get all of their ideas out. But if they try to get it all out at once, it's just a gobbledygook. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I feel like everything that you've mentioned today, Christina, I think addresses the biggest fear I think that English teachers are facing right now, which is AI. I feel like there is so much like fear wrapped up in what it is.
Mhm.
And Marie and I have had a lot of conversations on the podcast about like kind of trying to set that aside and like not be afraid of it, but learn what it is and learn how it works. But what I love about what you've shared today is that every single tool, strategy, even philosophy is meeting kids where they are in the smallest ways, right? Like
Mhm.
for so long, like I've said earlier, right? Writing was viewed as this kind of end product, and it was always at a large scale. It was the essay level.
Mhm.
And I love that this whole conversation has valued the sentence level, the editing and revising of small little things, looking at your own little body paragraph, not submitting these big works, these huge writing pieces. And I feel like that's such a liberating kind of green light to give teachers today, which is to teach writing is different from assigning writing. And if we're going to teach writing, we, number one, need your book because that is where those lessons and strategies and ideas are going to come from. But to value and make space for these little moments that are really where writing, the confidence is gained, the little tools along the way are gained, and we don't need to worry so much about the product. Like, yeah, sure, we're still going to assign writing as a product, but like, I don't know. I'm less concerned about their essay scores than like the way that their sentences are improving little by little, right? Like as a writing teacher, I value so much of what you shared with us today, and I think that that's a really huge way of kind of separating from that panic about AI. Like, let's just look at the little pieces, and it's okay.
Definitely. And just assigning smaller writing in class, like it's so beneficial because you see the students, you're not, like, let's be real, you're not grading these 5-page essays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And half the time, and I'm guilty of this when I was in high school, I would find the longest quotes possible because my
Yep.
essay needed to be a certain amount of pages. And I would ramble on
Yep.
just to meet that level. And it was all worthless. But if you tell me you have to fit your entire idea in like 300 words,
Yeah.
like you're really going to focus on the conciseness of your writing and getting your message out. If students can do that, just like with the 3 sentences where they answer the prompt, they include the evidence, and then they analyze it, those 3 sentences, if they can do that, it applies to the bigger writing that they will eventually do.
Yeah. We always in my classroom talk about it as Legos. Like you start with each page of the Lego manual that comes with the kit has a little piece of it. And once you put the little pieces together, you can put them all together. And then that creates the bigger thing. That's precisely what, and like they get that. They get the zoom in. We as a teacher community have to get the zoom in in order to really reach them. And like Amanda said, meet them where they're at. While we're talking about that teacher community that needs this book, like I personally could see early on in my career, this would have saved a lot of blood, sweat, and tears because I would have been affirmed, I think, in some of the things that I knew were true. But then your book articulates the things that I know are true, but I'm not sure how to get to as a teacher in the classroom with all of these other things going on around me. It cuts out a lot of the stress because it's just there and you've got it defined and you've got all of those little pieces that can then get strung together. So I can see this book really benefiting specifically newer teachers. I mean, not just newer teachers, but like I can see as a veteran teacher who I want to help the other teachers in my hallway and in my building and just in my district. And I physically don't have the time to help them personally, but like you've already made it. So I could be like, here you go. My friend wrote this. And
Maybe
it's
bookmark like a couple chapters. Like, hey, this is where you want to start.
Post-it noted.
Here's your annotated copy. I think that that's a great way for, it's no secret that we're overloaded more and more every day, classroom teachers. And like the best support we can give is to each other, but like we can't even do that sometimes in real time. But I could give somebody your book and give them real support without it taking it out of me. And like, I plan to do that.
Yeah. So definitely newer teachers. It's a book that I wish I would have had as a newer teacher. Luckily for me, teaching in Southern California, where it's so diverse and you have so many language learners, I had that epiphany about what students need and meeting their needs. and also that epiphany of like breaking free of my own restraints about where I personally think students should be, because that's not valid at all. In my student teaching, I had that epiphany just because nothing was working. And I talk about this story in the book about how like nothing was working with the students, and it was a classroom management nightmare. I dreaded it. I second guessed whether or not I even wanted to be a teacher. None of the students were listening. And then I started getting in my head thinking about like, these are bad kids. And that was not the case at all.
Right.
I was just over their heads with my expectations. And when I gave them a sentence frame, every single student was working. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, this is where we're at. And so once they felt, I'm going to go back to that word, confidence, that they could do that assignment, do that lesson in class, it completely switched around. And I'm forever grateful for that epiphany early in my career, because it does reaffirm what we should be doing in the classroom. And what's so wild is that, yeah, some of these strategies are focused specifically for EL students or for our SPED students or for our struggling writers, but they also work just as well for our high flying students because it gives them more tools. So I'm lucky I had that early on in my career. It would have been helpful to have this book, to have those reaffirmations. But even my master teacher, who now in the book I talk about it, she's across the hallway from me.
So cool.
I had a copy for her, but she bought one like the day I posted it and read it before I even got my own copy. And hearing her praise about how she was changing some of the things that she was doing to implement some of my strategies. I'm like, this is like a 25, 30-year veteran teacher. So, I mean, I'm going to say it's helpful for all teachers, especially if you're struggling. If writing is a struggle, if kids just aren't getting what you're trying to teach them, maybe it is time to shake things up and try some new strategies.
Kids are different than like those of us. I mean, I'm in year 18. When I came into the game, what engages them is different. And at the same time, kids are kids. Like you said, you help them access something, you see where their confidence is, you see where they can do, then they'll keep going. But expecting something bigger than they are able and or ready to deliver is not going to work. And that's just a fact, right? And so like you said earlier, taking yourself out of it and like where I think everybody should be is not necessarily real nor beneficial. So let's just see where they actually are and then find where we can like find the entry point.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like any teacher who's kind of, like you said, at a stuck point in their writing teaching, this would be such a great way for me. Well, when I was reading it, what I was feeling like, oh my gosh, like I have someone to talk to about teaching writing. And I know I wasn't actually talking to you, but I was like, these are like the internal conversations that I'm having alone. And like, talk about the kids need to be vulnerable to write, but like teachers need to be vulnerable about teaching writing because it is hard and there's not a lot out there about it. So like to have your guidance as a baseline or your guidance as a way of like framing where you are and where your kids are and where their journey is, that to me was the most grounding part of being inside your book. It was awesome.
Yeah, and that goes back to like, I'm used to these huge English departments with 20 other English teachers to fall back on.
Right.
A lot of teachers don't have that. And so it is that like little companion, your buddy.
Yeah. Your little friend. And it's a really pretty color. So there's that. Christina, will you tell our listeners where they can find your book and then where they can find you in case there's like 4 people listening who haven't already followed you on Instagram? Because I'm pretty sure most everybody that's listening to our podcast also follows you. But yes, where can we find your book and where can they find you?
Okay, so the book is available on Amazon and also on Barnes & Noble online. And you can find me on Instagram at The Daring English Teacher, where you'll find daily snippets about my teaching life, strategies that I'm doing, and then recently stories about my puppy.
No, those are the best. Those are the best. I loved watching you guys walk the other day during the immense heat wave that still hasn't broken. I'm with you.
She was really she was scared of a bunny rabbit. She wanted to cross the street because there was a bunny rabbit. And I'm like, girl, you're a pit bull. Like people are saying, no, you're afraid of this little bunny rabbit.
That's so cute.
She's still a puppy.
She's so cute. We love it. All right. Well, Christina, thank you so much for joining us today. I cannot wait, like I said before, to share your book specifically, but also just to kind of get this episode into as many ears as possible, because the more that we share things like this, and even just this conversation between the three of us about like really not just why you should meet kids where they're at, but how to meet kids where they're at, because that's a different conversation that we've just had, I think is going to benefit. The more teachers it benefits, the more kids it'll benefit. So
100%.
Everybody share widely, and make sure you go check out Christina's book. Make sure that you go and follow her on social media, because she has even more than she just described to share. If you go back in the archives, especially, I know that finding your blog helped me quite a bit, multiple times in my career. Yeah, but we just really appreciate you. And thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this afternoon.
Absolutely. Yay. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful week at school, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening to Brave New Teaching.
We'd love to keep the conversation going over on Instagram.
And while you're there, check out the links in our bio for the most up-to-date events going on in the Brave New Teaching community.
Thanks for being here, and have a great week at school.